Anna Marie Piersimoni, and we can actually see the screen, which is a great thing today. A little bit of my background: I now instruct at Cal State Northridge, class in New Directions in Digital Media. Really starts in old directions and leads into everything from VR and AR to robotics and AI. Before that, I was in fine arts. I went to an art school, actually. Then I worked in the industry, commercial, e-entertainment, ABC, public television, and then did workshops and professional development things at the American Film Institute. So they're starting with enhanced television, interactive TV, and then around the digital content lab. And actually did a K through 12 screen education program as well. So we're going to be talking a lot about screens and where and how we are seeing things. So that's sort of why I'm in this space. And let me just get my notes back up. We have a great panel here. How many people, just to get guests in the room first, how many people here have used virtual reality? That's actually a lot, more than there was in May. How many people here have used augmented reality? Not quite as much. How many people know the difference between them? Oh, good. That's good. You sure? How many people know? Yeah, right. How many think there's a difference? So who knows mixed reality? Right. Okay. So maybe HoloLens might be a good example of that. We were talking about it earlier. I'm starting to feel, especially after days here, that what we have going is a mixed up reality. We're facing, yes. We're facing a lot of things. You probably have heard a lot of buzzwords over the course of the week, if you've been here, or even the day, about presence, empathy, and VR, the empathy machine. Ever heard the term walking the plank? Talk about real. There is an application. Some people have fallen off that plank. In the old days, we had things, and it's been talked about here in Interactive, leaning back, rather, or sitting forward, how involved you are in something and actually acting within it. Do you relax or do you immerse yourself? We've been talking about storytelling. People have suggested that maybe it's story living, story experiencing. So our production language is changing. It's changed through all these different iterations, and maybe our actual language is changing as well. Possibly cognitively we're changing. Our first panelist comes from many different realities herself, many worlds within that. Art, film background actually, film studies, software development, and absolutely works in what I like to call the natural physical world, so we can make that distinction. So she makes art, has developed augmented reality, and she's going to concentrate a little bit on that, even though AR wasn't in the title of this panel. So I would like to introduce Zanka.
Hi, good evening.
Afternoon.
Afternoon. Okay, so we will start a little bit about giving you a background of what I do. I'm a sculptor, and I started getting interested in these headsets and the evolution of where they've all been going. And I use Raku, which kind of makes futuristic stuff look like it's from the past. And I was tracing the last 50 years of the development, and I got so interested in it that I started adding augmented reality to my pieces and started to experiment with it as an art form. So I did it on street art buildings using ceramics. And I was in love with the magic of it and the look on people's faces when they saw 3D objects appearing. I did site specific installations as well. Here's a really quick little video. So you could actually move around the three-dimensional dragon. This is a headset-based AR piece that installs art on top of art. This is sort of the Harry Potter effect, where you play a video and you let it run through an image. And these are sound interactive augmented reality pieces where the person makes a noise and the augmented reality changes based on the noises that they're making. So today I want to talk about the 5 biggest challenges, because I feel like sometimes you can learn from other people's mistakes almost as much as from looking at good stuff. And I want to give you don't have to be a programmer or anything to create augmented reality. you can just get a crew together and do it just like you would a movie. So I want to give you just a really quick sneak peek of what it takes to create. And then I'll go over a little bit about what's going on in AR with hardware and software. So the biggest challenge in creating this is coming up with a good idea. It should be where you put your most focus, your longest time. As we know, AR and VR is still cumbersome. You know, people are putting on a headset, it's fogging up, it's uncomfortable, or it's expensive, or they have to download something. So, I mean, you look at the patients in web, 40% of people abandon a web page if it doesn't load in 3 seconds. Okay, you look at 3D movies versus regular movies. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I typically just choose the regular movie over the 3D, and so do a lot of people. So just putting technology, just the technology itself is not enough anymore. We're moving out of demo mode into actual content, so you want to be careful about the idea. The second most important thing is coming up with a good idea. That's number one and number two. That's how important it is. You're to spend a lot of pain and a lot of effort creating it. And if your idea isn't strong, it's not going to be worth the effort. So how do you know it's worth the effort? One of the things is that you have to reserve time in your schedule to experiment. And that's one of the biggest mistake that people make, is they don't have time to see what works. You know, and a lot of people that I've talked to at these conferences don't install the apps, they don't do VR. I mean, they said in the last panel, the best way to learn about VR is watch it, watch it, watch it, watch it. And that's so important.
We're going to be moving away from containment
here's a little clip again
and onto
of just
information everywhere.
What some people are doing with it. Creative applications of augmented reality. Of course, architects, amazing. WordLens was bought by Google. You can install it on your phone for free with Google Translate. It will translate anything that you look at. IKEA Catalog has been using this for a long time. People can see what their furniture looks like. They can see how the drawers open up. It's a really cool thing. Lego shows kids what's inside the box, how it moves.
Magic Leap's technology is
Magic
reportedly built
Leap,
around something called a dynamic
is not out yet,
visualized light field
but you can kind of see they use light field technology. This is the desktop of the future. You know, everything's going to be voice activated. Everything's going to be with your hands and gestures. Forget about mouses. You're going to learn gestures that will control. You have as many screens as you want, etc. Yeah, this is the very, very near future. I mean, you can try on clothes without trying them on, and you'll have your body scan, you'll be able to go, and again, this is in shopping malls already today.
Yeah, it's
Try
like I'm right
different
there.
colors.
It's like in the bathroom.
Lowe's is using a
This is cool.
Holo Room where you can look at your bathroom before you actually have your new bathroom made. And here's an application that
Now, what you've just
sees
seen
different
is a vision of
structures
how
and
HoloLens
changes the way we
could
educate
enhance-
people in a deeper way. Something as simple as a cow or a hat that changes your face is a really fun thing. Often the most simple ideas are what is so interesting. This creating optical illusions is also really great. Here's a dragon coming out of a piece of art. Again, the trigger's just a piece of paper, so you can move it around and have three-dimensional objects come out. I'm gonna skip this section in interest of time. Well, I'll play a tiny clip because it's just so cool. So this is the HTC Vive, if you're not familiar with it. You can see how she's totally immersed in a fake world playing with a cute puppy, and that, you know, makes her even more immersed because she's looking and reacting to something that is interesting. Okay, so
So that green grass wasn't interesting enough on its own.
okay, again, number 3, test the idea to see if it's a good idea. Here's the common pitfalls that I've seen. The experience is too long. The transition from your trigger to augmented reality isn't compelling. You know, you might have technical difficulties of the models being too big. The sound wasn't good. You know, so again, if you can have a prototyping software to kind of see where you're going, it's even better because you can see before you get all the programmers and the modelers together, you can see if it's working. Simplicity is stunning, illusions are good, the shorter experience and shareable things are really popular. The fourth challenge is getting someone to install an app on their phone or download an augmented reality app. It's hard to give them the instructions on how to do it. So that's another thing that you have to think about from the very beginning. And then you have to deal with all the people that didn't install the app. So that's another problem. We don't have time to actually play this, but you want to create a video of your experience so that people who didn't install the app, you can tell your story on your social media, on your website, etc.
You kind of have to tell how to do it at the beginning of them doing it.
Right.
Instructional.
Right.
There's a learning curve that's incredible for all of
Right.
us.
So in the interest of time, we're going to skip through this and move on to the next speaker.
Okay. Well, when I say I like to refer to it sometimes as one world and many realities. And certainly Zach has shown us one area of it. Larry Rosenthal has seen the evolution from.
No picture.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me get that.
Oh, I thought you were going to introduce everybody from the beginning.
but we went so there, so I'm going to.
Maybe we should do that real quick.
Can you get back to where I was? I'm so sorry. No. We want your face there. That's part of the reasons why
No, it was all about interface.
I put all these together. Okay, here we go. This is Larry Rosenthal, founder, designer, director, producer of Cube 3. He's seen this evolution from the creative world to the corporate world through many, many perspectives, many angles, and through the interaction of interactive television, through transmedia storytelling, which was really all over digital Hollywood just 5 years ago. All these VR panels were about transmedia.
Last time I spoke. Yeah. Last time I spoke, 7 years ago.
Oh, yeah, well, even 7, maybe 5 too. And now 3D VR. He's always looking at that next new dimension in the creation of worlds and story worlds. So take it away, Larry.
Yeah, so I'm Larry Rosenthal, wearing the same shirt because everything is interface. Before they tell you its story, it's interface when you're dealing with these kind of mediums. To fill in a little bit, yeah, I've been doing this for 25 years or so. I'm trained as an industrial designer and a narrative filmmaker at the same time, being the child of Star Wars. So I literally got one of the first color Macintoshes in New York in the late 80s, and it had a beta of Swivel, which was Young Harville software for Jaron Lanier to prototype models so they could do things in VR, and when he coined the term VR. So I was on a panel like this in 1992 when the first VR panel where Doom was shown for the first time on a laptop. Nobody thought it was VR because it was on a laptop. Mistake. And everybody else had expensive HMD equipment that everybody called VR, and Sega was going to save the day. Mistake. And Lawnmower Man was out, and that first all took place. So I've seen, technology media is a wave, and I've surfed many of them through virtual reality. Again, 3D design being my main interest. So
Thank you, Larry.
first
Sorry
slide
that
up.
we were off of that.
Okay. So,
Great.
so what I'd like to talk about quickly today is I took a big slideshow for an hour and took about 5 slides out about thoughts and ideas. But what I can look at the time today, which is VR, AR, 3D story worlds are converging. We're talking about transmedia, we're talking about narrative, we're talking about story, and 3D. 3D is a media. So in 2016, we're at a place where the media attention again for new products and tools that are coming out allow you to world build and design for what we call VR, AR, and 3D story worlds simultaneously. And this is that holy grail that a lot of people are thinking about here, from the mom and pop indie to, of course, Disney, who's really the icon of trying to do this now. Let's go next slide. So some quick comments. What is transmedia, world building, 3D story worlds? We're talking a little bit about definitions, buzzwords. We've got 30 years of that. But by now, I think most of us think about Star Wars, Marvel Universe, that means all Disney now, which it wasn't all always, as the places, the things, the characters. The point is they all live and can be part of any medium or expression. That was the transmedia ultimate holy grail. So we notice using real-time 3D media today, which literally could be that model of that dog that we saw in the video. I've got 25 years of those videos, on my website and projects. So example, movies, games, TV, comics, VR experiences, AR and ARG is ultimate reality gaming. Pokemon is AR, ARG. Online, toys, novels, and books. I mean, isn't that Star Wars? Isn't that the Marvel Universe? The bottom line is Stan Lee and Ditko drew Spider-Man and wrote a couple of bubbles for him 40 years ago. Today, somebody's going to take out Alias or Maya and model something for the first time, put it up on Sketch something or other, animate it, put it into goggles, and then you have the birth of a VR character like Spider-Man 40 years, 50 years later.
Oops. Here we go. This is,
Just some thoughts, and here, the idea is to present the best idea or product experience in each media. So again, people say, what am I gonna do with VR? Oh, we got a movie, I want my cat. VR is about character, it's about Mickey Mouse. I'll just tell you quickly, 25 years ago, when there was WebVR for the first time, everybody was about characters and storytelling, and lots of agencies took SGI money and made dancing bunnies and dancing characters, and none of them most of you don't know anything about it today, because it's a medium, might not be the right medium. They have a perfectly good medium for cartoons called television. TV and film, spaces and objects tell a backstory. This is world building, 5D, Alex, who I haven't met. They set the tone of the world. They target the viewer, right? An aged world, right? Dungeons and Dragons. You know where you are when you see knives versus laser guns. Games. Games really are the balance of rules targeting a player. Fairness, action, reaction is paramount. If it's not fair, it's not really going to be a good game. VR, nonlinear spacers, objects work as an interface first. Interface is about usage, and they target the user. I'll get back to interface again. Next
Yeah.
slide. Toys. Toys about play. Okay, is it a game? What is Lego? Is it a game? It's a toy. Sandbox. The biggest house on the hill now is not owned by a film guru. It's owned by a guy who made Minecraft. No narrative. Who's the star? You answer your question. Novels. Comics. Obviously, this is linear by nature. Obviously, the major IPs start as comic books or fairy tales that are driving these companies today. Of course, the 3D assets can be used. You can illustrate a comic in 3D. Do it, use Maya, make your characters, take those characters, move them into another medium. You already have it. Obviously, interactive, AR comics. We got to see a little bit of what you were showing in your slideshow. And there are already AR comics out there. This is something I put together about a year ago, part of a presentation, almost 2015, says, next slide.
oh, sorry.
Pyramid. It should be an illustration. There you go.
Okay.
People want to define things. What's VR? I look at VR as something right now, there's a hierarchy, right? It's about immersive media projects, and they struggle with these 3 different elements. Which one dominates your project will also have to describe your elevator pitch. Is it storytelling? Is it playing? Or is it experiencing? Experiencing is the walk in the woods. It's the 360 video in the national park. There ain't much play and there ain't much story. It's a narrative. Oh, the trees are dying. Well, I see them dying. It's a narrative, right? Playing, One thing I'll mention quickly, everybody wants to talk about VR like filmmaking. Filmmaking is part of television, part of film. 70 years, 100 years of eye-ear media. Going back to a thing called Second Life, look at their logo. It's an eye and a hand. This is the main media of VR. Not these guys, not these guys. Don't believe me, I don't care. I'm joking, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have come out that way.
Next one.
Yeah, some thoughts. Where I started and from the last slide. Everything is interface in VR or AR. Comes back to the simplest thing. What am I doing? Why am I here? From the minute you slip those things on to the instructions in AR, this is about an interface. What does interface mean? Interface is not the last thing that you hire some junior designer to put some words to hang over the picture. This is an interface, but in most computer graphics and VR, this is what people consider interface. No, interface is everything that you're going to encounter between the medium and the message and the viewer. What's the viewer?
Another slide.
Let's stay here for a second. What's 3D interface communications add? I want to say immersion, more powerful than intellectual engagement. This is an emotion, not an empathy machine. First, third person, I'll let that one go. The age of the user, next slide. Again, 25 years ago, this term was coined either by me or another guy who was interested in what was in CD-ROM, Greg Roach, hyperbole. Part viewer, part user. It's a hybrid experience must be resolved, right? This is immersive media, interface first. Laws of nature must be set and understood. Gravity, is there death? How much of a fourth wall is there? Again, who, what, and why? Realism versus abstraction. As an interface, function versus metaphor. Are those buildings in the distance? Are they shelter or a target to be blown up? How do I know? Are the other characters there to meet a bond to, empathy machine? Or are they there to be cannon fodder? How do I know? It starts with the first package or the first review. Think bigger than just the thing you're doing. Next slide, please. There we go. This here, which we're not going to go through completely because we're definitely going to be crazy, is I was invited to Story Code, which some of you may know what that is. It's kind of, again, a relic of the transmedia bubble 3 years ago out of New York and LA and others in Miami. And I figured, how can I communicate to them, being the 3D guy where I'm coming from? So I actually had a slide before this, which was transmedia design codes. And what this is kind of almost like a choose-your-own-adventure diagram. Everything you need to know from coming up with a good idea to getting it on network TV is on the decision list here. It's the top, like what is the, what 3D virtual media? Is it story, is it play, is it experience? Is the interface first, third, or God view? Sims was a God view game. The style, realistic, abstract. Who are the inhabitants? The artifacts, the causality, the universe. Natural law, or am I making up laws? Because you got to train people. You go through something like this and you check off each thing on the idea, your big idea, and you'll find yourself with a 3D transmedia creation that works across all these platforms because you've answered the right questions before you even study a
That's an
project.
amazing
Very cool.
grid right there. It's very cool. I want to move along here to Ascot. There we go, Ascot Smith. So we're going kind of clearly going right into next generation storytelling, although Larry's obviously somebody who skips from one generation to the next and on every level. So storytelling and production. Ascot is actually pretty firmly grounded in a visual arts background. Like me, he also went to an art school. He also has a background in public art, so that's kind of interesting, the whole interplay of public and private within this new storytelling world that we have. And really, I think we'll emphasize, he is also working with or augmented or virtual reality cartooning and definitely multi-platform narratives.
Yeah,
So go ahead.
thank you. Yeah, so I've had the luxury to work on multiple VR and AR and ARG projects, including in-car entertainment projects, working at USC's Mobile and Environmental Media Lab. And I think one of the challenges that we encounter always in the beginning of any project is really like, how do we onboard a user into a new media? So really teaching the audience the new tech while attempting to express a story. If you want to go to the...
Yeah.
So, and just to provide, you can go to the next one. So just to provide some examples, so it developed what was called a robot talk show, which is a late night talk show which utilizes an AR app to find hidden jokes within the show. And then additionally, we have an interactive cartoon that is an interactive cartoon but a hybrid visual novel and branching narrative game where you play as a detective and a telepathic cat to solve crimes together. And so my strategy for bringing people into kind of unique experiences is using humor and genre as a way to familiarize people with what they can expect out of the experience. So utilizing a late night show format or utilizing a detective procedural is a way to at least set up some anticipation for what they're going to get out of the experience. And additionally, I've found that as soon as someone like laughs at something that occurs within the story, like the technology essentially vanishes. That they just kind of go further in and they want to participate further. And using humor, I think, is like a really strong tool to basically disengage someone who is, just learning a new media. I guess we can continue to the next one.
Sort of a vanishing point that we're looking
right.
towards. Okay. Do you want me to keep going or?
Yeah, sure, I can keep going.
No, I didn't ask if you wanted to keep going. Do you want me to go to the next slide or stay on this one?
Right, yeah.
You have no choice. You're here.
I know, I'm on the panel.
The machine.
Right.
is part of it.
So I just want to present an example of a project that is kind of moving from animated television into virtual reality. If you want to go ahead and go to the next slide.
Okay.
So if I don't know if you guys are familiar with the show Rick and Morty, which is a really sarcastic, postmodern kind of late night comedy show. Well, one of the co-creators created Squanch Tendo, which should kind of already tell you like the kind of content that they're making. And essentially, you know, they're not trying to replicate the storytelling that comes out of television in VR. They're just trying to take the kinds of experiences, the kinds of humor, and apply it within that format. So if you want to go ahead and go to the next.
Sure.
And so these are just some screenshots. Unfortunately, the trailer is not safe for work. But they just released it this week. It's called Accounting. You play as an accountant at a virtual reality firm that is doing really well, and they want you to continue doing your job as an accountant, which means going into virtual reality and playing through levels. And at each level, you basically have to find the next virtual reality headset to go kind of deeper, kind of a Inception-esque.
I mean, what could be more fun than pretending to be an accountant?
Yeah, so it's a dark, it's sarcastic and humorous, and I really feel like the humor kind of helps translate the experience and moves. It makes you kind of revel in the limitations that that kind of early VR games might be kind of grappling with.
I just want to interject really quickly. 20-somewhat years ago, Dilbert VR was one of the major big projects being funded to be this kind of thing, but it had to be Dilbert sitting there on his typewriter, character-based. I won't give the names of who did it all again, but it shows you that in 20 years, the vision thing, how now they're doing this with it. Because this is what they should have did.
Yeah.
20 years ago. This is what I got thrown out of the room for suggesting.
Yeah.
To, you know, was you are Dilbert.
Yeah.
You don't watch Dilbert. That's
Yeah.
what I was saying about. And it's.
Yeah, exactly.
I know what they're doing. This is amazing to see this.
Yeah, no, it's great, cool. I'm glad you
Is
enjoyed
there,
it.
Ascot, is there an actual, any kind of educational component to this, or is it pure fun?
I would say it's completely pure fun. Yeah, you're essentially getting yelled at your job to perform these tasks, and it's sort of like, you know, I'm trying to think of a way to express, but basically it's kind of making fun of you for not knowing how VR works, which I think a lot of people who are going into this are like, duh. But in a way, it's funny because of that experience. I can understand that there might be people who might not appreciate that sense of humor, but
No, there aren't.
it happens. They might not want to get yelled at by funny British-sounding people, but
Personally, I want someone to pay me to get yelled at.
That was the Monty Python.
right, exactly.
Which was the best of the CD-ROM.
But I think it just really expresses the kind of formal qualities of VR within the kind of game space that's currently being developed in a really kind of postmodern and hilarious way.
Right. Well, it really illustrates that putting yourself in someone else's shoes aspect of VR.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I guess I just have one more point. So my background is as a filmmaker, but also as a game designer. And I think like one of the biggest challenges that I've encountered is really recognizing that the story cannot be the hierarchy as you're designing any interactive work. And it's really, the hierarchy is often shared with the game design and the story, and they both need to kind of essentially like reflect what the interactive experience is going to be. So often you might have like a great story, but with bad gameplay or kind of lacking interactions, but no one's ever going to get to that because people are just not going to be engaged. Like they're not going to experience the great prose that you've come up with if your interactions have not been thought through. And the same is kind of said too, is like, you know, you need the visual metaphor, you need the kind of narrative metaphors to facilitate the gameplay as well.
It'll be interesting when we get past game play, because you know, again, definitions of things. I mean, because games became the predominant media of interaction, of you know, and maybe that's going to be an interesting thing to see in like a digital Hollywood show where people, again, from a narrative world, are trying to define what they're trying to do. Like I say, sandboxes are play, not game.
Sure.
Games are, again, rules, but again, that's just been the popular, predominant, you know, thing that looks like a 3D cartoon media. Quake is game,
Right.
but
Yeah.
VR will make it so much more.
Did Esko, want to talk
No,
about
I-
this slide at all, or
No, I'm okay.
or the?
I think we can move on. I think
Okay, Element?
I've spent my time. No, yeah, check it out if people haven't seen it. It's beautiful.
There is actually a pretty incredible augmented reality sandbox. Speaking of sand play, that's literally as you move the sand around, and there's augmented reality images that change with the shifting sands.
Is that a location-based piece, or?
It's a projected,
Projected,
it's a
it's
projected
projected,
thing,
yeah.
so it's projecting
pretty
augmented
incredible.
reality, so when you change the sand, it's projecting different images on the top based on the topography, how the water's falling, like
Ah.
all that. It's a very,
So
very cool.
Okay, so it's even
Yeah.
virtual sand.
It's real sand, yeah.
It's real. It's real
With
sand, but with
projected on top.
projected on it.
Totally
that you,
mixing, yeah, totally mixing reality.
Yeah. I don't
And
think
you
it's
don't
called
need a
mixed reality.
headset, which is great, because when you use AR projection, you eliminate this whole problem of having someone have to
Well,
install.
that's been the problem with VR, is having lines of people waiting. And
Yeah.
how do you show VR
No,
to 40
that's-
people?
That's why you need a
10 minutes?
VR arcades for that, and I'm waiting to have Tilt Brush without a headset myself. I want to move along now. I invited Shane Pace, who's Dr. Shane Pace. He was was actually my instructor. I'm working on a master's degree in media psychology at Fielding Graduate Institute, and Shane was my instructor in immersive media and social change. So now we're talking about the ways that the language is changing, production. Forms of production are changing. The story world is changing. We're seeing a lot of the same thoughts throughout that in terms of our adherence to real story, good story content, to characters, point of view, and audience. What's happening in our world actually? Are there actual cognitive changes that are happening while we're using this equipment? Are there ways that people are engaging and remembering their own stories differently by these experiences? I'm going to let Shane address that and more and tell us a little bit more about his background.
Okay, so yeah, if you want to do Tilt Brush, you can, without the headset, there's a red pill.
There's a what?
A red pill.
A red pill?
The colors,
And Google has the blue pill.
and Google has the blue.
Facebook's the red pill, Google's the.
There you go.
I think that's what the candidates both took before the last debate.
So hi everybody, I'm Dr. Shane Pace. I'm a media and technology psychologist. I'm a founding consulting partner at Reality Science. I'm now the director of client relations there. It's a think tank and a consulting firm. We help media and technology firms of all sizes improve content, measure experiences, and understand the psychology of human engagement with their media. I'm also the director of technology at the LOT Project, and we create augmented reality applications and experiences that tell stories and that have a lasting social impact. So what's a scientist doing on a panel about the aesthetics and language of VR? I am an AR and VR junkie. I love the space. But I'm here to talk about the problems that exist when we talk about the language. When we go back to traditional media, we know the language, right? It's there, it's in stone. There are many, 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 many experts for almost 100 years in the language of traditional media. And you don't even have to be an expert. You can look to those experts and figure out how to do traditional media. But when it comes to AR and VR, there's really not a language, in my argument, that we have that's set in stone. There are pieces of it that we're starting to put in place now, but we really don't have that language yet. How many are content creators? I think there's quite a few of you. So I assume, like all of us in content creation in one form or another, you find it challenging to make quality content. How do we make this stuff? Well, let's talk a little bit about that today. First and foremost, though, one of the things that I've seen here at Digital Hollywood and just about every other VR, AR, mixed reality, new technology media panels and presentations I go to is the terms that we use are being very loosely thrown around. How many people have heard everything here at Digital Hollywood being called VR? Every single panel.
Just
Whether it's
about.
content
Almost,
creators, whether it's executives at studios, whether it's coders and developers, everything is VR. Stop it. It is not. VR is VR. VR is very specific, right? True VR is an experience where you are embedded into a virtual world where you are the actor, you are the character, you move around that environment, you interact with that environment, you create the story, you create the narrative, and you have an impact on that story. 360 video is 360 video. It is not VR. But why is that important? But it's not a big deal. We can call it whatever we want. No, you can't, because when you start mixing those terms and you start throwing them around loosely, the language that we're desperately needing to create the great content goes out the window. So if we're creating content for a studio because some executive somewhere says, oh, call that guy, he knows how to do VR. And they call you up and they say, here's $1 million, go make me VR for this children's program. You're like, okay. And you get all the details you think you need, and you go and you create it, and then you turn around and you deliver it to them. They go, what the hell is that? We don't have one of those headset thingies, and how are we going to do this? No, we just wanted a thing on the phone that you could do like this. And as lame as that story sounds, it happened to somebody I know. And it was a big studio that does kids productions, so we won't go any deeper than that. But that's what they wanted. They wanted a simple thing that they held their phone up and did, landscape VR. But they didn't like what they got, which was made for Oculus and Rift, or the Rift and the Vive. So using that language, it's really, really important that we use the correct terms, because when you don't use the correct terms, it takes away from the power of the other. 360 video, I don't personally dig it, but it's got some great spaces. And there are some good things that are being done in it. But if you call that VR, that takes away from what VR is. And if you call VR 360, you're taking away the power of what VR is. So you need to use those terms, and we need to establish those terms as an industry and use them as a standard. I was talking with my colleague, the soon-to-be Dr. Tanisha Singleton, brilliant mind and one of our partners at the consulting firm, Reality Science. And she was talking about the amount of times this week she heard the term experience thrown around. And how shocking it was that every single person seemed to have a different understanding of what the word experience meant. Well, experience has a very, very fine definition. You can look it up. But everybody uses it in a different way. Again, this is doing disservice. As a media psychologist, it drives me crazy because as a scientist, everything is set in stone, right? We're very rigid thinkers. It's this, and this. When you start adding variables, it changes things. But when I hear things like immersion and presence and perception being thrown around in various ways, it drives me nuts because everybody means it in a different way. But for me as a scientist, they have to mean the same thing. And so as content creators, if you really, really, really want to make an impact, if you really want to do a great job, first, use the terms properly. Know what perception is. Know what immersion is. Know what presence is. Some of those things we can measure, some of them we can't, some of them we're learning how to measure. But learn what those terms exactly mean. Because if you can do that, then you can sell the crap out of what you're doing to studio executives, because you can walk in and they say, oh yeah, we know about that presence thing. You go, no, you don't.
Well,
You don't know. And when you do tell them what it actually is, then they get very excited about it.
That's true.
So
I think when you're talking about experience, you've got to listen to Jimmy and roll over and let Jimmy take over.
yeah, right. So for me as a media psychologist and as a content creator, it is truly all about the story. And Larry and I were having a conversation outside earlier. He brought up a really good point. When we talk about some of these newer technologies, it's really not about story anymore. It's about narrative, because that narrative can be interactive. It can change as we start to engage with that technology.
It's about depth.
Yes.
Layers of the story of something. A Shakespeare story has, there's depth to each character. That's why, Romeo and Juliet as a story, iconic.
Right.
But the narrative is quite simple. Boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy. In Star Wars, these are narratives, and frankly, all our movies are just narratives today because they came from 16-page comic books.
So are we
Exactly.
thinking of story as having a traditional way of being very linear, beginning, middle, end, as opposed to the narratives?
Well,
Thank
yeah, I was also going to say, it's also what he was saying about it's just as much about the user experience and the interface as it is the story.
Right.
Because I've done augmented reality T-shirts where stuff's coming out, whatever, and I tried to tell a story that was too long, and people were like, oh, this is too long. Like, they wanted to see the illusion of something coming out. They wanted the physical, that user experience more than the story. So you have to realize that story could be secondary, or at least, as he mentioned, on par with the actual experience.
I mean,
So-
we're trying to create artifacts, and this is an industry trying on the conference too. I mean,
Yeah.
See, industry wants product.
Absolutely.
We're looking
They
at
want
artifact.
product and
they
profit.
don't care how they get it or what it is, and they
Right.
only want it when the other guy has it.
Right.
And so, 20 years ago this summer, I came here and put out a thing of all this through AOL, and they just, when they couldn't figure out what to do with it yet, I went to Sony, and it was like, the first question I said when I had this, massively multiplayer online science fiction world where you're the star. In other words, Halo or anything like this in 1996. Who's attached to it, and who's the star? Who's attached to it, and who's the main character? And when I said you,
Still a lot of that.
they didn't know what I was talking about. There was a complete disconnect, between me and everybody else in the room, because I said it's Brad Pitt. I mean, it's Leonardo playing the guy who dies on the boat. And I said, no, you're going to die on the boat at the end.
I think we've got two sides of the same coin a little bit of
But that was a
the
taxonomy issue in the
chimera.
industry.
Yeah,
And
but-
that's what I agree about taxonomy. But my only point would be, that's for an industry who creates that when there is an industry, and there's no industry in VR.
Not yet, and that's just it. It's chaos theory out here. It's the Wild West.
It's been this, and that's what technology drives creatives and artifacts.
Yeah,
In
absolutely.
my opinion, 30 years of it.
Yeah. Well, and we're
It
reaching
only
that
once in a
30-year
while
point.
breaks out. Games and entertainment broke out, as we said, outside. I mean, it took 15 years to that one weekend when the top game outgrossed the top movie that this conference changed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we've seen throughout all of these different technological advances that, yes, if you have a good story, but the means of presenting it, the gameplay or whatever fails at it,
Right.
you lose the value of that good story. Likewise, if you've got all the gadgets going, it's nothing but a tinker toy. It doesn't go any further
tool for the
in a
right
real
job.
story. What I want to know here, and I think actually Ascot, we talked about this before, was how is this changing? Now, a lot of what's happening with virtual reality is that we're still working from the outside looking in terms of the tools as creators. What happens now, the tools are changing so that you can actually build this story world, this environment from within the application. You want to start first, Ascot, and then?
Sure. Yeah, I think that one of the biggest challenges, at least anybody who's just like starting out and trying to make their own VR or AR content, is that you're just guessing. And you're doing a lot of like just trial and error. You're positioning things, and then you're going to put your headset on. And that back and forth is just like very time consuming. So there are new tools that are coming out which allow you to actually build 3D environments, lighting effects, all sorts of things like while you're wearing the device. And I believe that this is going to allow people not only just to like practically speed up the production process, but kind of build a better intuitive understanding of what their audience is going to experience. And I think that's the kind of most important element is, you don't have to build an entire experience and then find out like everyone just loves staring at the corner up in the on the roof somewhere just because it just was shiny and you didn't think about it because all your time's been spent on making, I don't know, this hallway look cool. So if you're building these things like within the environment, then that's something that's going to be, you're going to notice that like immediately.
Yes,
I want to
but-
follow up really quickly because I've been holding my tongue about tools and panels for a week, and since I'm at least on this one, I'll say it. And this, again, is something, a 25-year vision thing, or playing devil's advocate to an entire industry. The reason Second Life became the only virtual reality kind of world that maybe anybody knows about in this room is because it was the first one to have the tool and the distribution platform together so that anybody could throw a couple of cubes in the world, the way that Minecraft does if you play games. But in terms of a sandbox virtual world, all the others before that relied on you to build stuff in Maya, Max, or Stratavision, whatever the other tool was of the day, and they all died. But because Second Life allowed that merging, and actually it was Caligari, Microsoft bought and killed, and an old Roman Normandy who was doing that before that, because I'll tell you all about it if you want to know. But tools, you've all heard if you're not paying for it, you're the product. Well, if you're a creator and you don't own your tool, you are the tool. And this is, I'll just say right now, 25 years ago, the CD-ROM revolution hit, and it's exactly this revolution repeated. But when Myst was made, there were over 50 tools you could make it in that you could own. And make Myst and put it out there and own your product. There's almost no tool sets being developed in VR and 3D real-time media today and 360 video that when push comes to shove, you control the fate of your work. And
Zenka,
I would
maybe-
say- and you guys can think about that.
Yeah.
That's all
I was
I'm
thinking
gonna
maybe
say.
Zenka might add that. No, it's a really great point, especially being an independent artist and working within so many different
Yeah, I mean,
fields too.
I want to encourage all you guys to start experimenting and using the tools, because there are a lot of tools there. They are like owned by a company that let you log in, create an augmented reality experience. There's Layer, Blipper,
You talk about
Erasma.
Mateo.
yeah, Augment,
Erasmus,
Erasma. So those are things that you can go today, try it out, test it out. Does it look good? Use it for prototyping, all that. And it's available to you today.
Cautionary tale is that 2 years ago I had, I was showing augmented reality to Pepperidge Farm with some fish swimming around. There's all the CEOs and corporate people in the room, and I was using Augment, so it worked. But of course, if I'd gotten the gig, we would use Mateo. But 3 months later, Apple bought it, and everybody who used Mateo for commercial AR projects at the same quality that you're showing to me, they're not here today. They're not even able to answer the Pokemon call of 2 years later.
Wow.
So I make a cautionary tale. And Augment has started sending me emails again, telling me they're around. I hadn't heard from them in 2 years.
But yeah, I mean, on the other side, if you can't update your software for every cell phone that comes out and things like that, your stuff will be lost. It can be bought out, it can be lost. If you're in control of it, that's great, because you don't have to depend on what he's saying.
Well, this is the story
But you also
of all
don't have to
real-time
update it.
3D media for 20 years, is that at my website, you will see still pictures of all the videos, because there was no video on the internet for 20 years, of all these projects. But you can't immerse yourself in them. You can't see them on the screens as they were really meant to be, because all the engines are gone. All the players are dead. And, this is about a legacy of medium. I mean, television, you could still get a VHS of I Love Lucy and see it 60 years later. because,
Pretty amazing.
so-
I'd like to let us immerse it just a little bit before we go. We'll have some time for questions, but I'd love to show, mainly because I want to see this updated piece, so you're all under my control for this. But Shane, would you like to intro this a little bit, or have me
Yeah,
do it
so
first?
one of the things we have created at the Lot Project is we try to make experiences in AR that have a lasting social impact. Call it CSR, if you will, but we want to do things that actually make a difference in the world. A few years ago, we were at the Vietnam Memorial with my son, who was 10 years old, and my wife and I, of course, were in tears walking around. It's a very powerful, moving experience if you know what it is. But my son, who was 10 at the time, said, "Wow, all these people are dead." I said, "Yeah." He said, "They died in a war?" He said, "Yeah." Sad. That's all it meant to him. And we realized that we were missing a huge opportunity to tell stories about people who are gone. Because once you're gone and you don't have anybody to tell your story, you're done. That's it. Unless you've been, unless you have your story somewhere, that's it. The only people who remember you are your family. So we created the Vietnam Memorial application. It's an AR application in which, you can go ahead and start it, in which people can, families of those on the wall can actually drag and drop content, video, stills, and story about their loved one on the wall into our app, and then the app creates an automatically edited video that they choose the music for. And when you go to the wall, you know which names are hot. These names are geotagged, image recognition, and they're also character recognition as well. And so it launches an experience
Can you do the sound from back there?
that tells the story. There's no sound yet.
Oh, there's no sound there.
Yeah.
Okay, no wonder.
There'll be sound in just as soon as we're done here when we get that.
Yeah.
So this is just a demo. It's not the live app.
This is definitely, we were talking about artists being scientists, scientists being artists. You wondered why you were on the panel, Shane. This is truly art.
This is great.
So Michael Tennis was my colleague and business partner's father. See, the app notices the name, it highlights, you click it, and it launches a story.
Can people add narratives from the web or something to it? I mean, their own stories?
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Multiple types of templates.
And the app has it all on it, so anyone with a phone, add it, and know that it's up there in Washington with a few clicks.
Yep.
Big no.
Yeah.
Big no. There's no story, but there's a story.
A lot of stories.
That's the point. there's that kind of use of VR, which is just, you know, way beyond just getting some character or money.
Yeah, there's a lot. Unfortunately, the things that do drive the field are going to be FPS, first-person shooter, and
Well, I
pornography.
think that will change. You know, again, when the PC launched, if it had just been spreadsheets, I mean, that's the difference between 30 years in the Mac and today.
So we are able to utilize the tenets and theories from psychology that we know from the physical world, and we're able to apply them to the digital world. We can manipulate the content, we can manipulate the outcomes, and we can measure all this in real time. So everything from biometric measures to EEGs to surveys after the fact, we can tell what a person is feeling about the experiences. Ultimately, in the next couple of years, we should be able to create content that is changeable on the fly based on those metrics, and tailor it specifically to that person's needs and interests at that moment.
So we're talking about data-driven storytelling.
Data-driven storytelling. So
well.
why is it important that you understand the psychology behind what you're doing? Because if you don't, you run the risk of not understanding your client, your consumer, your user. But when you understand them and you understand their wants and needs, you create an experience that they might really enjoy and they might just talk about and share with their friends. But if you create a horrible experience, I guarantee you they're going to talk about it and share it with their friends, and you run the risk of damaging your brand.
Right.
So that's what a media psychologist does, is we help you come in and figure out what's the best ways to go about this emerging marketplace and the immersive experience.
We used to call it the digital content workshop at AFI, we called it the why bother plan. So why constantly, why does your audience, your user want to bother? What makes you bother to do this
Yeah.
deep down? I'd like to take some questions if you want to say something quick, and then
I was
get
just going to
people
say,
going.
two things, ROI, ROE, return on investment, and then there's return on either experience or entertainment. Those are the two balances that really kind of answer the question of when someone's going to give you a buck to do this thing.
Yeah.
And that might be this should be the killer app, not the, I mean, when the PC revolution created the digital revolution 30 years ago, games were not driving it.
Right.
And it took 15 years, 20 years before games began to drive, before Razer would buy THX today.
Right.
I
No
don't
thanks to Sega.
Well, the thing is, I don't know if it has to be a game that drives AR.
Oh, no, I don't think it will. I think
And I
that-
don't think it will either.
Yeah, I think we're already seeing from companies like Daiquiri that gaming is not necessary to drive
Right.
AR.
I mean,
Right.
Daiquiri, there are only two interesting hats that I've seen about VR or AR. One is Daiquiri, because it's a hard hat, and the second one is the guy with the baseball cap sitting here.
There you go.
All right. Any questions from the audience for our panel? So we go. There's one right here, first one, and then the second one here. Yes. Yes.
Please, Shane.
Further to your point about universally understood accepted and deployed terminology.
Yeah, yeah.
In the AR and VR space, where can your preferred lexicon be found?
A lot of it can be found in psych textbooks. Like, if you want to know what perception is, I can hand you a cognitive psych book, and it'll tell you exactly what perception is. So these are generic terms. These are not broad-based terms, but they get bantered around in broad-based ways. And that's, as a scientist, it drives me crazy. But when we talk about content creation, we talk about new technology. When we don't have solidified terms, when we're all using them in a different way, we run the risk of having people not know what the hell any of us are talking about. And of course, we're in the Wild West days of AR and VR, right? We're all using different SDKs. We're all using different hardware. We're all using different cameras. And we're all trying to come up with the best products. But until we start to unify all these things, we're not going to have the best practices being put forward all the time. And it's going to create confusion in the marketplace, and in my opinion, confusion for the end user. And, well, shit, for the content creators too. Yeah.
All the way around. There's one over here, and then another one. Yes.
I had the same question, but
Yeah.
I came up with a new.
Please. I hope I can answer it.
The purpose is just to take assignments, or do you sometimes make up something for problems?
That's a good question. So do we solve problems on our own? Yes. That's what research is all about as a scientist. But then, yes, our other side of the true money making is in the consulting field, when we have large firms, from production companies to telecom firms, that are dumping multi-millions of dollars into the AR and VR space. And they come to us and say, we screwed up, and we don't know how to fix it. And we say, okay, what'd you do? And we're like, wow, yeah, you did. Yeah, let us help you with this. And so we can use the basics that we all already know, but for some reason get lost. And then we can get into the much deeper psychological theory, but it goes beyond just the theories of in-group, out-group, and social experiences. When we get into the actual cognitive sciences to help them understand their user experiences, the interactions, things like that.
Thank you. Yes, right here.
Have you studied the differences in other cultures and countries? Because I've gone to a lot of English-speaking countries, and it's a completely different experience.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, at Reality Science right now, we're working with a German-based company that's creating a virtual reality experience in multiple different types of venues. And one of the biggest challenges for us as scientists is going in and dealing with a totally different culture and a totally different language, and us understanding that certain experiences that we would have here in the States is a very different experience than they have there. Now, there's still a lot of overlap, but we have to learn a whole new cultural experience. And so that's something else to keep in mind.
I also am very interested in how cross-cultural differences, language barriers might get smashed as we start incorporating gesture and imagery and things that are not so language dependent. It's still going to be culturally dependent because we have cultural images, cultural dreams even, that we'll have to address. But I think we'll have less of a restrictiveness from text and alphabet-based systems. Yes.
Follow up, just, we're entering again the next computing platform, the 3D computing platform, about objects and places instead of pictures and pages. And I will say, you say, how does that change the world? How do we change to the world, or or the world change to us? Well, the whole idea of icons on interfaces, on software, really came because all languages have different size words. And it was easier for game companies or for any company to make one little 64 by 64 pixel square and put a paintbrush on it for draw than to write the word draw in 5 different languages. And it was cheaper because of localization costs. So the biggies like EA and other. So we've created a world of emoji cons over 25 years. So, I actually called it the Esperanto for Gen X. Instead of Esperanto, which was a so-called universal language push in the 60s and the 50s.
There is a board that oversees emojis, though, and there's a great Steve Colbert piece on it. If nobody's seen it, Google it.
We all know the controversy of how long it took for a brown emoji to show up on
Right.
Apple's interface. But all of that is a visual, we talk about a little outside, a visual language, So in other words, tech wags the civic world, or this, dog tail wagging each other. So just the 2D interface changed. We didn't get a chance. The tech world changed us. We have another chance again. That's why I'm in this after 25 years still, and I'm back, because this is a chance for us to throw all this stuff out again, just like Jobs killed Flash and he killed everybody's moneymaker on the PC. He gave us this. He made everybody do this for 99 cents. And now we're going to throw it out again and do it with this.
I can't almost do anything without quoting McLuhan at least once. So first we build the tools, then they build
You get an
us.
F in my class for that.
I'm sorry, what?
I said you get an F in my class for that. You know that.
Oh, no, I got better than that in your class.
That's the irony.
The thing I'd like to
Yes.
add is that I know how, I'm an engineer and we get picky about words and whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm also the engineer who just wants to use the word in the most creative sort of way.
Right.
So I go both ways.
We just had a workshop at Northridge. It was the third year in a row that they did it. First 2 years, it was an Art of Innovation that brought together the School of Business, the School of Engineering, and this time, the third time, they invited the Cinema TV department, which I was part of through multimedia. Visual Arts wasn't there, which I said really has to be there. The designers, engineers, and business together, because it really is interwoven, and those problems need to be solved creatively together. Engineers are some of the most creative people I've ever met.
Absolutely.
I was just going to say, one of the most important questions you guys can be asking all the other people when you go to these conferences is, what experiences have you seen that you liked? What things have you downloaded that you liked? It reminded me the humor that you were talking about. There's an HTC Vive demo where you're in a space room and it's telling you how to perform your job in VR, and you don't know how to move in it, and so you're banging things and you're opening the door, and they say, "Oh, you just killed an entire civilization." You're like, "Oh no," and you're laughing, and then they say you're fired and you have to go. They open up the floor. So yeah, humor is a really great thing, and it's been copied and other experiments that people have hitched on that have worked are your sort of roadmap to what places to explore.
I think the part of it is the physicality of it, and we're also stern and earnest about developing this new technology. We're not really playing with it per se.
Yeah.
But Ed Button in the earlier panel mentioned, well, maybe Shakespeare, and that
On a holiday.
made me think Italian Commedia dell'arte. If you look at that, the comedy takes place in a physical space, moving around. The way actors are now they're seen by the audience all the time. There's no cutaways. Forget B-roll.
Shakespeare and a holiday.
We need that, yeah. That's it. Both sides of the jungle. Anyway, any more questions from the group? We've had a great, yeah.
I have one for Smith. How many, right now, I'm working on a game, hopefully for Sony PlayStation. And I was working on it, and I realized, okay, I'm telling the engineers I want this, and we're the creative, we're doing this, but we need to design the look and everything. So the engineers, I know that there's one person who does some designing. So what I want to hear is how many different groups work on a game, in case I'm missing something. How many components?
So there's a million different I mean, there's probably an infinite variation of how many different people well, I don't know, that's probably not true. But it really depends on the kind of game that you're trying to make. So if you're doing something in VR, like you're obviously going to need an engineer, hopefully a designer, but you're probably also going to need an art director. And that person is going to be really vital in helping the player navigate through the space, or pretend to navigate through the space. So I would say that, yeah, you really need especially in VR, I think you need it's very important to have an art director who has a technical sense for how to execute, but also like a really strong sense of kind of like space and level design.
You're better off with an architect, or an interior designer, or a set designer, than a graphic designer who made logos and album covers.
Right. So
I produced and creative directed lots of games, so I hear you.
yeah.
I hope they get all your cards.
No, games are the most, the reason that games even now cost more than films is because they've become the most complex media form. And that's why they're talking about $1 million a minute now for VR, because VR is going to be the most expensive for truly immersive 3D. In other words, but for using a 3D engine like Unreal and creating a PlayStation game, the Star Wars PlayStation game that we all want, that will come out, and is being done now, ideally will be much more expensive than the next J.J. Abrams movie. Because you've got 360 degrees of real reality around it. Now, how much they spend on the marketing is a whole other issue, and how they expect to get the money back from China is a whole other issue. But in terms of, the below the line and above the line costs, right? This can be expensive. And
It'll be over $200 million.
Production value is
600
important,
million.
though.
You can bounce it around about these games pretty quickly.
You could also make great experiences for no money with small crews
Well, that's
as
the
well.
whole point.
And that's because nobody knows what works,
Web
even the big
VR.
companies. So,
Look,
yeah.
follow what WebVR is coming out of Google with Daydream, which was X3D and Vermal and other things before. These are going to, even as much as they want to open source a lot of these engines, this will also not allow Unity to be bought by Adobe and to all of a sudden kill your distribution.
Even with the smallest budgets, though, production value is an eye for that, and that includes typography. Good photography.
Oh, yeah.
Good sound is incredibly important. Sound is more than 50% of any
Yes.
audio visual.
Absolutely.
It's really important. Yes, Art. Our audio person is named Art, fittingly enough. There's an incredible piece that I saw recently at a workshop, a conference on chronic pain and virtual reality. It was done by a couple in the Netherlands, shot beautifully underwater. of dolphins. It had passion and purpose, though. It was using virtual reality to work with kids who had autism or ADHD. It's grounded in a therapy that already exists using animal and equine therapy, but beautifully shot so that you got the impression that you were swimming with dolphins. They are also having goggles made from recycled plastic material from the ocean. So you can put those on and literally go in your backyard pool and swim with dolphins and have this experience. I'm ready for that, although I know they have to have sensors on because I already bang into the concrete when I'm swimming. But yeah. Huh? Well, they will be. Oh, yeah, that's the whole point. Yeah, but it's actually also that they're using material from the ocean. But yeah, if you're going to go underwater and swim
There is one
and see this.
waterproof HMD that I've seen. out
Have you
there.
really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure that's
There's a
that's
press
close
release
enough.
flying around. Google it, you'll find it. They'll find you.
Something will be around there. I mentioned in another panel, I have a pair of Swim P3s that use the bones in your skull conductivity
Yes.
to hear audio. It's an amazing experience because you feel it
Inductive audio.
for your
Bone
body. Huh?
phoning.
What?
It's called inductive audio.
Inductive, right, exactly.
And it's
See, that's
1940s
why we have a
World
scientist
War
here.
II.
Yes, sir.
Exactly.
Right here in the front.
Because it's so interdisciplinary, what's going on in VR and augmented reality, I'm wondering what sources you guys use and recommend to keep up on developments in the field.
Excellent
Voices
question.
of VR.
Which?
Yes.
Voices of VR podcast.
Yeah.
Unbelievable amount of information.
Yeah, I'm someone who's been tied into keeping up on pieces of data for 25 years. Right now, Upload VR, VR Scout. We got a Twitter account. You put a VR at the end.
Road
of it.
to
Everyone-
VR.
Everyone will follow you.
VRLA conferences
VRLA
here and in Orange
conference
County.
we do.
Yeah.
I think the uppest on the press release stuff will be VR Scout and Upload VR.
And Road to VR. Those are the
Yeah.
three
Yeah.
big websites that are dedicated
Are
to
there
the.
any journals yet devoted to it?
If there are, I'll write the first articles and they'll end up getting, they won't end up publishing. That's what, actually, I have an article in VR that I re-bring out every 7 years that should have been published in 1996, but they never get out into print. It's all digital today. Who needs paper?
Yeah, I think
I
that.
mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think to your question, I feel like it's right now being kind of divvied up based on like what kind of content it is. So there's a lot of kind of independent film websites that are covering like VR filmmaking, and there's a lot of game
which are the
sites.
best ones in the film area you find?
God, what is his name? Yeah, I guess I bookmarked them for a reason, so I don't
I
have
was
to
going to say
remember. But
the
I can look it
UX
up. on my
people are
phone
also
after.
getting in on it now, like IEEE and those, all the user interface.
Oh, yeah. Go to those. Zgraph. Anybody goes to Zgraph, you'll see
just there
wonderful
again.
examples there, especially of
ACM,
visual.
AAA.
ACM, yeah.
Yeah, that's ACM Zgraph.
Yeah.
But I would highly recommend Voices of VR
Yeah.
because he's interviewed
Yeah.
The best.
everybody in the industry that's important on every subject. And if you're interested in sound or whatever, you'll listen to 10 different episodes of very current,
Right.
up-to-date information.
And you will, like we've seen at the Buzzword here, almost everything, TechCrunch, all of these places have articles on it. You can't stop. If you do a Google alert, your
Believe it.
inbox will go crazy. But these are some of the premier places to
Create a
get it
Twitter
narrowed
account
down.
with the VR in the name, and they come to you.
Yeah.
Is there a way to do an up and running model without all this money?
A prototype. There's plenty of those.
Well, yeah, I mean, AR stuff definitely, with the tools she was talking, Augment.
Unity.
Yeah.
Unity. Unity.
You can
and
find a
Web
Unity
VR.
designer anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's the level of HMD that you can afford at the time, or the level, in terms of display. I mean, one of the real problems right now is that the investment it takes to get you can't make art unless you know what the final distribution platform is. It gets very difficult to make editing decisions if you don't know if it's going to be on a screen or on a piece of paper, or and if
Right.
you can't see it, how do you edit it? And if that requires you to have a Samsung VR, VR for $100 plus a $600 phone or whatever that license is, or an $800 Oculus or Vive, I mean, most people have asked those guys for stuff.
Yeah, that's your first development question. What platform is this going through? Is it
Right.
going on a phone, a mobile, or is it going to go on a Oculus? Is it going to go on a Vive? What is it going
Be
on? And
square,
then-
rectangular.
Because if you can't get that platform to actually be part of your production, your design process, it's like, never being able to see anything.
And
I think we're going to close. One last comment.
Oh,
from
I was
us,
just
Scott,
gonna
and then-
follow up and
These
just
guys,
say-
thank you for staying so long.
yeah, if you're working on essentially no budget, then yeah, Unity is a free platform you can use. There's an asset store where you can get tons of free assets. You could buy assets, and you can just start experimenting with your mobile device. It's definitely a completely different experience from your mobile device to kind of room location tracking platform like the Vive, but it's a way to just kind of start understanding the constraints that are part of the medium.
See if your idea is good.
Yeah, to start testing.
Yeah. That,
It's
that,
it's the experimental phase, and that's why I said before about tools. You have to understand that, to be any kind of, you have to master you have to have the ability to be able to master your tools, and that's something that people have to understand.
You can go to a 48-hour hackathon too and be a
Yeah.
game designer and have developers working on your piece for all weekend long and see where you got with it and learn a lot.
yeah,
Yeah,
those
do
are
some
great.
game jams.
That's the way to see these, those definitely are the ways to get to see the equipment. Because if you can't afford an $800 Vive, those events are the best ways to get to play with them.
Thank you, everyone,
Thank
for
you, everyone.
sticking
Thank you.
around. Have a good Friday.
And we're out of here.